Story will start after short information. This channel is demonetized for sexual gratification. I will be not posting there for next 3 months. Go into video description and subscribe my new channel where I will continue this channel legacy. What steps would you take if you discovered that the person you were about to marry had cheated on you with her employer, despite the fact that all marital arrangements and plans had been meticulously carried out? This is exactly my story, and it turned out to be a harsh truth just a few days before my wedding ceremony. But instead of meekly accepting the treachery, I made the decision to take a daring action, which caused the entire congregation at the wedding to be taken aback. To begin, let me invite you to take a seat, grab a box of tissues, and join me as I relate the story of how I came to the decision to confront my unfaithful fiancée and her boss at our own wedding. My name is Jed, and I've spent most of my life in the great state of New York. While I wasn't born in New York, ever since my parents moved there, I've considered it home and have lived every moment of my life there up to this very moment. I'm a relatively easygoing person, and I make an effort to be respectful and kind to everyone I come in contact with, because I place integrity and faithfulness above all else. The events that transpired in my life have left me feeling much more broken than before. Yet, I also believe that one should never back down from doing what is right, regardless of the circumstances. On the day of my wedding, I accomplished just that, despite the fact that it was one of the most difficult things I've ever been required to accomplish. My entire life had been leading up to this one day. I was all set to marry the lady I loved more than anything in the world, and we were at the altar. I first saw her at a work function, and my interest in her was instantly aroused. She had all the right ingredients to win me over: brains, humor, and looks. We got to conversing, and before I knew it, hours had passed. It was imperative that I reconnect with her. Since we began dating, I have come to comprehend love in a profound way. She won my heart, and now I know that I've reached the end of my sanity. Very quickly, we made the decision to start a life together and commit to seeing it through to the end. After we finally connected, many more good things began to happen for us. We both improved our financial situations by finding new work and by receiving raises in our hourly wages. Everything went so smoothly, and our lives are continually improving, to the point that we were able to purchase a home and a car of our own. With her, I felt like I discovered someone who truly got me. But suddenly, the tide began to turn. Because of the increased involvement of her boss in our relationship, I began to feel like an unwanted outsider. She seemed to prefer his company to mine, so he started inviting himself on our dates. At first, I didn't give it much thought, but eventually I began to assume that there was more than just platonic interest between them. When I questioned her about it, she said it didn't happen. She told me I was overreacting because he was just a buddy, but the suspicion that something wasn't right wouldn't go away. If we're supposed to be on a date, there's no reason to bring your employer along. She continued, trying to make me feel like it wasn't important when it was. I saw that as time went on, she began staying home more often than required and dwelling on the stress at work. As her salary increased, I used that as an explanation. Not content with that, she then began to argue that I had no right to come get her from the office. I finally decided to inquire as to her motivation, and she explained that the boss had recently moved into a house not far from where we currently resided. My already unsettled and anxious mind is getting worse. Sometimes she'll return so late that I'll have to force myself out of bed to answer the door. After I complained some more, she said that she was holding off on following the boss since he wasn't quite ready. One day, I stayed up until she got home, and then I peeked out the window because we live in a duplex, and lo and behold, when they arrived, the boss came down and hugged her, and then he left. And I was furious, and immediately, I decided to be calm and allow her in before I make a move. And then, the doorbell rang, and I answered it, and I asked her what the hug was for. And she said it was a hug of a boss I was hoping to discuss it with her the next day. But when she got up for work, she had nothing to say. Seeing as how this was a whole new experience for me, I sent her a text message apologizing for my tone. The knowledge that I need to keep a closer eye on her so that I can catch her in the act is rooted deep inside me. The employer simply abandoned her during that time and went. I had a hunch that something was off, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I had observed that she was behaving in a different manner, and I got the unshakable impression that she was concealing something from me. But since I didn't have any evidence that could be considered conclusive, I didn't want to accuse her of anything before I had proof of it. After that, I had an idea on how to proceed. Since I was aware that she had been spending a lot of time with her manager, I made the decision to look into the situation. I began my investigation into their relationship by looking for any hints that would support my thoughts about them being an item. Because I am aware that communication is essential in any kind of relationship, I have made the effort to get to that place. Thus, I started to look through her social media sites to see if there was any evidence of their relationship outside of their words. Yet, to my astonishment, there was nothing there. It appeared as though my fiancée had done a good job of covering her tracks, as she had made certain that there was no record of their communication on any of her social media platforms. Yet, I didn't give up. I was sure there must have been some other approach I could take to learn the truth. And at that point, I had a thought. I reasoned that it was possible for them to be interacting through her email. So I made the decision to check it. And much to my dismay, I was able to locate what I had been seeking for. There were dozens of emails exchanged between my fiancée and her boss, each one containing personal and revealing information about their affair. They discussed how much they desired one another, their future plans to be together, and how they intended to keep their affair a secret from their families and friends. When I went through their emails, I experienced a range of feelings, including rage, despair, and a sense of being betrayed. But the feeling that overtook me was one of relief that I had at last arrived at the truth. It was clear to me that I needed to discuss what I had discovered with my fiancé. I knew that the talk I needed to have would be challenging, but I had no choice but to have it. I had no choice but to have it. I had no choice but to stop her from continuing to lie to me and stop her from having an affair behind my back. Something inside of me kept me silent whenever I had the desire to take action, such as questioning her or presenting her with my evidence. I want her to suffer greatly as a consequence for the choices she's made, and I was considering the most agonizing thing that could happen to her. As the days pass, our wedding day gets closer and closer. My future wife informed me that she needed to report to work early the day after our wedding, which was just a few days away at the time. When you consider that it was the day of our wedding and we were meant to be leaving for our honeymoon, I thought it was rather strange. Add to that the fact that my employer granted me a leave of absence lasting several months in order to attend the wedding, and I'm convinced that she ought to be entitled to the same treatment. But what justifies her being exempt? It's a question that's been making me curious to find the solution to. But when I probed further, she dismissed my concerns, saying that she had to run out to a series of urgent meetings. Not until I double-checked her email did I learn why she had to get back to work so quickly. She was explaining to him that she couldn't join us on our honeymoon since she had to report to work bright and early the following day. Then she uttered something that made my stomach turn to ice. She expressed excitement about spending the entire wedding day with him without any other guests. She expressed her eagerness to spend the second day of the wedding with him and her desire to ensure his happiness. What I was hearing boggled my mind. My soon-to-be wife had already made plans to spend our honeymoon with her superior. I felt physically ill and emotionally devastated. At least I had clarity after learning the truth. I knew I had to tell her the truth about it, no matter how hard it was. As a result of this, I decided to make her life even more difficult by planning to confront her and her boss in front of all of the wedding guests. On the morning of the wedding, just prior to the reception, when I looked into her eyes while I was standing there, I could see the remorse written all over her face. It was inconceivable to me that the lady who had been the object of my affection and confidence for a significant portion of my life could betray me in such a heinous manner. I took a few slow, deliberate breaths as I realized that calling off the wedding was one of the most challenging tasks I had ever been assigned. Yet I was aware that given what I knew, there was no way that I could go through with it. Hence, I took a few seconds to compose myself before going up to the priest. I informed him that it was necessary for me to address the congregation. He was uncertain at first, but he could tell by the look in my eyes that I was determined, and eventually he gave in and decided to let me speak. As I stood there in front of the audience, I could feel the pressure that came with the magnitude of the truth that I was about to share. I could tell that they were perplexed and wondering what was going on by the looks on their faces. After that, I made my statement. I revealed everything to them, including the fact that my fiancée was having an affair with her boss, how I had discovered this information, and the reasons why I could not forward with the wedding plans. I was able to make out the surprise on both of their faces. They were taken aback and bewildered, and they were uncertain how to respond to what I was saying. But what stands out in my mind the most is the expression that was on the face of my fiancée. As soon as she realized that she had been discovered, she became utterly distraught and tears began to well up in her eyes. Who is her superior? He was boiling mad. It was hard for him to accept the fact that I had let the world know about his affair and destroyed his reputation. Even though it was a challenging and stressful time, I was confident that I had made the correct decision. In spite of the fact that it was distressing for all parties concerned, I had decided to call off the wedding and reveal the truth. I was aware that the end of our relationship was near. Even though it was a difficult and emotionally wrenching ordeal, I was confident that I had made the best choice. After the decision was made to call off our wedding, I couldn't help but wonder what would become of my ex-fiancée and her superior. To tell you the truth, I couldn't have cared less. They had both deceived me in the most terrible way imaginable, and I no longer wanted to have any interaction with either one of them. Yet, as it turned out, karma had a way of coming back to bite them when they least expected it. A mutual friend informed me that a few months after our wedding, my ex-fiancée had been sacked from the job that she had been working at. It would appear that her supervisor had made the decision to put an end to their romance. And when my ex-fiancé refused to accept his decision, he fired her from her position. Boss also lost his world as his wife divorced him and left him with nothing. When I found out that my ex-girlfriend and her boss had been given what they deserved, I couldn't help but feel a feeling of pleasure and justice. Even if that wasn't the conclusion I wanted, I had to acknowledge that it was the one that they had chosen for themselves.